I don't want to say my name, but my story serves as a cautionary tale. Steer clear of temptation. My childhood was nightmarish. When I was a child, my mother passed away while my father drank his sorrows away in order to overcome his grief. This turned him into a violent person. Our house was a shack with moldy walls and leaks. I went to school in torn clothes and was hungry almost every day. Violence was unchanging. My father would beat me up and keep me in the basement for no apparent reason. All I thought about in that cold and dark cell was escaping from it. There wasn't anywhere else for me to run, and it's only the anticipation of leaving that woe-stricken life made me stay alive. When I finally reached 16 years old, the whole situation cleared up, and I could see a solution, or a goal. The master Sebastião, who owned the bakery around the corner, gave me a chance to work there. He was a kind person who noticed something special in me. I had not had many positive moments in my life until I started working at Sebastião's bakery. He treated me like his own child, shared his professional experience with me, and also gave some pieces of advice. I felt like my future was getting brighter here. Over time, my financial situation stabilized. I rented a small room near the bakery and finally left my father's house. I felt a happiness I had never experienced before. The bakery prospered, and Sebastião even promised to make me a partner. But life, of course, is not a fairy tale. Everything fell apart when Sebastião was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He died within months, leaving the bakery to his children, who had no interest in the business. Without a job, I was evicted and adrift. One day, I ran into an old schoolmate, Ricardo. He was now a successful man, with a luxurious house and an imported car. Ricardo had always been problematic, involved in shady things, but now he seemed to have found a magic formula for wealth. After a few beers, Ricardo revealed his secret. He told me about a pact he made, something that gave him everything he wanted, but at a price. At first, I laughed at the idea. It seemed like a joke. But as my situation worsened, I began to consider the proposal. Ricardo introduced me to a contact who could do the same for me. On a rainy night, I found myself in an abandoned mansion. The man waiting for me was strange, with eyes that seemed to see my soul. There were no elaborate rituals, just a silent agreement. The price was my blood and an oath of eternal loyalty. Desperate, I agreed. The first months after the pact were a dream. I received a job offer from a big company and quickly climbed the ranks. Money, status, women, everything was within my reach. But, like everything that comes easy, the price began to be paid. I started to notice strange things. Objects moved on their own. Shadows stretched beyond normal. I heard footsteps in my house even when I was alone. I lost sleep, tormented by horrible visions. My professional success also began to crumble. Projects failed, co-workers died mysteriously. Paranoia set in. I felt watched all the time by something I couldn't see. My nights were a torment of nightmares. My health deteriorated, and burn-like marks appeared on my body. The price of the pact was revealing itself, and it was much higher than I had imagined. The breaking point came when I saw Ricardo being dragged by something invisible before my eyes. Screams of agony echoed as if from hell. The vision pushed me to the brink of madness. I knew my end was near, and that there was no escape. The nights worsened. Objects dropped without warning on the floor, and the walls printed the shadows which seemed to be alive. In addition, some people whispered near me in one voice like they used to do when you believed in devils. It was close to madness, though there remained something bidding me to stay rooted. I came to a contract which it seems has been wrested upon me now. Desperate, I returned to the mansion where the pact was sealed. There I found an old book, full of strange symbols. I tried one of the rituals, hoping to reverse the pact. As soon as I began, I felt a stronger presence around me. The air grew heavy, hard to breathe. A sense of absolute dread took over me. The flickering lights started to flicker on again while the shadows moved wildly around us. It was not so much darkness as a pitch-black pitch of roaring shadow world. At that moment there arose within me a feeling of suffering such as no one else had ever been able to make me undergo before, because it seemed as being torn out from my heart, or like unto some beast screaming out from below. I crashed onto ground with great suffering until every thigh turned black. I woke up in my room, covered in sweat and with claw marks on my chest. I didn't know if it was a dream or reality, but the marks were real. The pact was consuming my life and my soul. I was trapped in a nightmare. As days went by, the situation only got worse. I saw familiar faces in mirrors, distorted and full of pain. My nights were haunted by screams and wails. Loneliness and despair were my only companions. I sought help from priests, mediums, anyone who might know about pacts and entities. Most called me crazy. Then I found Anna, a respected medium. Desperate, I told her my story. She listened with compassion and agreed to help, but warned that the process would be dangerous. On the appointed night, Anna came to my house with ritual instruments. We prepared the environment. The tension was palpable. Anna began the ritual, reciting words in an ancient language. The atmosphere changed. The temperature dropped and the shadows twisted. An invisible force hit us, almost knocking us down. Anna continued the ritual with determination. The climax was an explosion of light and sound. The presence that tormented me seemed to be ripped from me, leaving a feeling of emptiness and intense pain. Anna collapsed on the floor, exhausted but alive. I was weak but relieved. The torment seemed to have ceased, at least for now. Anna explained that she had temporarily driven away the entity, but the pact was still in effect. The only way to get rid of it permanently was to find the source of the power that granted these pacts and destroy it. It wouldn't be easy, but it was my only hope. I began an unrelenting search for answers. Each discovery about the pact was more horrible than the last. I was dealing with forces beyond human comprehension. Each new clue led me deeper into a world of darkness and despair. The truth was more terrible than I could imagine. The power behind the pacts was ancient, an entity that fed on human misery. I discovered that the only way to defeat it was to sacrifice the very soul it had marked. It was an impossible choice, but I knew I had no other option. I returned to the mansion one last time, prepared to face my fate. The final ritual would be the most dangerous, requiring a sacrifice I was reluctant to make. As I began the ritual, I felt the presence drawing near. The air grew heavy again, and a sense of absolute terror took over me. Now it was inevitable. I would see the entity without any hope this time, losing my existence as a result. The words of the spell passed out my mouth smoothly, and with every syllable the darkness seemed to embrace me more. In spite of having unbearable pain, I had to press on, because it was the only way out for me and others who had suffered from its malignancy. Just before completely appearing, the being I was about to summon nailed me with a crushing power, and everything around me crumbled in a whirlwind of shadows and screams. Ricardo's face, twisted with fear and pain, was the last thing I saw before the prevailing darkness descended. Now, as I write these last lines, I feel the presence approaching again. The end is inevitable, and all that remains is fear. I hope my story serves as a warning. Do not make the pact. Do not give in to temptation. The darkness always collects its price, and sometimes that price is more than you can pay. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying. I will try to answer in the shortest way possible so that the story does not become terribly long. During my ultimate year in degree, financial problems overwhelmed me, which resulted in having difficulties in achieving my academic best, owing to huge debts. The time at the university was packed with school activities, leaving little time for rest or relaxation. Later on, I got to know about this man. This was someone who had always been quiet, but had recently started showing off how well he was doing in life. Rumors swirled about how he had achieved it all: flawless grades, generous scholarships, and even a new car. One night after a late class, I decided to have a conversation with him in the nearly empty parking lot. He was leaving the library, carrying a stack of books. "How did you manage to get all of this?" I asked bluntly. He glanced around as if checking if we were alone, then spoke in a low voice. "You need to meet Mr. Shadows. That's all I can tell you. Just like I did. You'll see." "Mr. Shadows," I repeated. The name sounded too ordinary. Shadows, after all, are everywhere. It seemed like a tasteless joke. "If you're truly desperate," he continued, "go to the library at 3 in the morning. Look for the untitled book in the oldest section. The answers are there." Those words lingered in my mind as I returned to my dormitory that night. The idea of a supernatural pact seemed absurd, but academic and financial pressures pushed me toward a pit of despair, and I didn't know what I was getting into. I decided to follow his instructions, risking everything in search of an escape, without concern for the consequences. I waited until everyone had left the library and ventured through the dark, silent corridors until I found the oldest section. Amongst the dusty, forgotten books, I discovered the untitled volume. Its pages were filled with ancient writing and enigmatic illustrations, various symbols I had never seen before. In the center of the book, one name stood out: Mr. Shadows. The detailed ritual promised power and wealth in exchange for a simple agreement, a solemn oath made in a dark, secluded place. I decided to perform the ritual in an abandoned building near the college, a dark stone structure with broken windows and creaking doors. There, in the damp shadow of the basement, I traced a circle on the floor with chalk, lit black candles, and recited the ancient words as instructed by the book. The air around me seemed heavy, an invisible presence whispering in my ears as the ritual reached its peak. When I finished, an intense cold ran through my body, as if a literal shadow had settled within me. A hoarse voice echoed in my mind: "The pact is made." In the days that followed, my life changed drastically. Doors opened wide: scholarships, internships at top places, and academic recognition flowed toward me. Jobs were offered before I even finished my degree. I was invited to prestigious research projects, earned a full scholarship to study abroad, and even won a national competition in technological innovation. It seemed like a dream come true. I bought my first car, money simply appeared, unexpected and valuable things arrived, gifts from close friends, and a leap to success I always desired. I was experiencing it without realizing it would last so little. The nightmares began as soon as the benefits came. At first, they were just fleeting glimpses of shadows moving in the corners of my eyes. Then came the dreams, where dark figures approached in the darkness, murmuring things I didn't understand, but it made sense when I learned the name Mr. Shadows. I woke up sweating, with inexplicable marks on my skin, and a feeling of being constantly watched. Academic success became a heavy burden in the face of growing terror that enveloped me. Desperate, I sought the colleague who introduced me to Mr. Shadows, but he had disappeared. Rumors said he had dropped out of school or gone crazy. Alone in my torment, I returned to the library in hopes of finding a way to break the pact. I went through the untitled book again, but the pages that once seemed to promise power were now empty of any solution. That's when the presence manifested again. The shadows thickened around me, moving like living beings, hungry for my essence. The lights flickered and went out, leaving me immersed in absolute darkness. The hoarse voice echoed once more: "You belong to me now." Desperate, I fled to the university chapel, seeking sacred refuge against the horror that pursued me. Yet still there, beneath the vigilant inspection of the cross, and murmurs from the lit candles, shadows were still stalking me. Strive as I might to keep my reason in check, my senses remained ensnared, barely maintaining a semblance of sanity. At this point, however, the following words from the past came into my mind. Confront your fears, face them head on. With one last breath of courage, I stood before the darkness surrounding me. You don't control me, I shouted with all my remaining strength. I am the master of my fate. The shadows faltered, surprised by my resistance. For a brief moment, the terror receded, as if my challenge had shaken the very foundation of the pact. With my heart pounding uncontrollably, I continued to defy those beings of darkness in the name of Jesus Christ, who was stronger than any evil. In the end, shadows started dispersing slowly, as if an angel from heaven helped me come out. The shadows gone like a smoke vanishing in air. Relief, coupled with exhaustion, was what overwhelmed me with the realization that I had managed to make it through the most horrifying night of my life. I thank God for the deliverance. Since that day, my life has returned to a semblance of normality, but the physical and emotional scars remain as constant reminders of what I've faced. I began to seek help from a psychologist for that matter. I learned that despair can lead us through dark paths, but that courage and determination can bring us back to light, and that after all, God is always ready to forgive us. The shadow of Lord Shadows still walks around me as the darkest corners of my mind. But as long as I maintain my determination, I know that I can resist any temptation or torment that he throws at me. Regarding the partner who introduced me to Lord Shadows and disappeared, I am still waiting for news from him. Sometimes I wonder if he found his own peace or succumbed to the same terrible fate that almost consumed me. However, one thing is certain. I will never venture into the forbidden domains that promise power in exchange for the soul again. Lord Shadows may still be out there, lurking, waiting for his next victim. But as long as I breathe, I will be prepared to face any darkness that dares to cross my path. And so, with these words, I conclude my account. May it serve as a warning to those who seek power and wealth at the cost of their own soul. Sometimes the price is higher than one can imagine. With a sigh of relief, I looked around the chapel, where the light of the candles now seemed more comforting than ever. The confrontation with the shadows had left its mark, but I had resisted. As terrifying as it was, at least it wasn't a complete deal, sealed with blood. Only one macabre ritual was enough to attract Lord Shadows, but also to give me a chance to escape. As I left the chapel, I felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't experienced in a long time. The university corridors felt safer, my colleagues' faces more familiar. But the memory of what happened remained, a silent shadow lingering in the corners of my mind. I spent the following months trying to rebuild my life, resuming my studies with renewed determination and avoiding any mention of Lord Shadows. Sometimes, at night, I still woke up sweating, reliving the horrors I had faced. But each time I did, I remembered the power of my own will and the courage that led me to confront evil. I am typing while staring out from my university apartment's window. It is quiet, and everything seems normal, like there are no strange creatures lurking outside in the shadows. I can't help but think that my friend who showed me the way into this fellowship with the Dark Lord has either managed to get his rest or is still trapped in it deep down where he made the bargain. One thing is certain, I learned a valuable lesson. No matter how tempting the path to easy success may be, the price can be too high. I survived my encounter with Lord Shadows, but I fear that if I had made a deeper pact, I wouldn't be here to tell the tale. The shadow of Lord Shadows may still lurk, but as long as I breathe, I will be prepared to face any darkness that dares to cross my path. And so, with these words, I conclude my account. May it serve as a warning to those who seek power and wealth at the cost of their own soul. Sometimes the price is higher than one can imagine. These events are disturbing, so I'll tell them in simple terms so you can understand what we went through back then. We thought we had struck a great deal with the purchase of the house on 7th of September Street in New Orleans, Louisiana. A young family like ours, trying to balance the budget, couldn't resist the low price of such a large house. True, it was at the end of a deserted street, nearly forgotten by the bustling city nearby, but we saw it as an opportunity for peace and space for our little ones. The first signs that something was amiss were subtle. Shadows moving where there should be none, faucets turning on by themselves, cold drafts making us shiver even on the hottest days. At first we brushed them off as quirks of an old house adjusting to our presence, but soon these quirks turned into something more sinister. One night, I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Quiet, deliberate steps echoing unnaturally in the stillness. I stealthily got out of bed, heart pounding, expecting to find one of the children sleepwalking. But there was no one there. Just the chill of the hallway and the faint smell of something musty, like old books left to rot. As days passed, disturbances became bolder. Objects vanished from one room only to reappear in another, arranged in strange patterns that made no sense. My wife, Emma, usually serene, started waking up with bruises she couldn't explain. She began hearing whispers in the night, murmuring voices inaudible in the corners of rooms where no one stood. The breaking point came when our youngest, Alice, only 4 years old, began talking to someone we couldn't see. She laughed and conversed, her voice carrying an odd cadence as if responding to questions we couldn't hear. When asked who she was talking to, she just smiled and said, "The nice lady who takes care of me." Desperation led us to investigate the house's history. What we discovered chilled our blood. Previous residents had left abruptly, claiming the house was cursed. Stories circulated about a tragedy that befell a family there decades ago. Whispers of a woman driven mad by grief who never left the place, even in death. But that wasn't all we found. Amid confusing accounts and old records, we unearthed a diary hidden in the attic. Yellowed pages recounted the life of Clara, the former owner of the house, and the unbearable pain she felt losing her young son to a sudden illness. Desperate, Clara turned to a forbidden pact, pleading to have her son back at any cost. The diary's final entries were unsettling. Clara described dark rituals, sacrifices, and promises made to entities she barely understood. In exchange for her son's life, Clara offered her own soul and that of anyone who would inhabit the house after her. From that moment, the house became a place of torment, a prison for damned souls, and a portal for malevolent forces. That night, as we sat in the dimness of the living room, shadows moved on the walls like restless spirits. The air grew heavy with a presence we couldn't name but felt pressing upon us. It was then we realized we had to leave, but the spirits of the house wouldn't let us go easily. That's what we felt. In the weeks that followed, manifestations intensified. Doors slammed shut on their own. Windows shook in their frames as if someone was shaking them from the outside, like a storm was happening out there. We started sleeping with the lights on, hoping the brightness would keep away whatever lurked in the darkness. Our deliverance came unexpectedly, through a casual visit from an elderly neighbor over 75 who knew the secrets of the house and what had happened there. She was known in the community as a good witch, a keeper of ancestral secrets and spiritual healing practices. She arrived saying she had dreamt of the house and us, needed to help us somehow, and brought with her sage, salt, and sacred materials for a deep cleansing ritual. She entered the house whispering softly in a different tongue like an ancestral language, making precise gestures to bless each room, invoking the power of benevolent forces to purify the house, to drive away the negative entities that dwelled there. The night after the cleansing, as I tucked our children into bed, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, as if something heavy had left me. The air was clear, free from the oppressive presence that had haunted us for so long. We moved shortly thereafter, leaving behind the house on 7th September Street, with its tragic past and restless spirits. To this day, I still hear footsteps in my head, in the silence of the night, shadows moving in the corners of my vision, as if they still want something from us. I wonder if the spirits truly left us, or if they still pursue us, perhaps still present there, waiting for another unsuspecting family to move in and awaken the darkness that sleeps within those old cursed walls. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying.